What happens when a beloved comedian walks onto a talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only to be blindsided by a host with an agenda? In just 47 seconds, a morning show turned into a battlefield, and what was supposed to be light entertainment became one of the most shocking moments in television history. This is the story of how Ricky Gervais was kicked off Lorraine Kelly's show after a heated clash that nobody saw coming. It started like any other morning on the Lorraine Kelly show. The studio lights were bright, the audience was ready, and Ricky Gervais walked out with his usual confident smile. He had been invited to talk about his new comedy special, and he was looking forward to a fun conversation. The panel that day included fashion expert Suzanne Reed, celebrity columnist Mark Henderson, and entertainment reporter Natalie Stevens. All of them were smiling as Ricky sat down in the guest chair. Lorraine greeted him with what seemed like warmth. She said, "Ricky, so wonderful to have you here this morning. Your fans are absolutely dying to hear about the new special." Ricky smiled and replied, "Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. We worked really hard on this one, and I think people are going to love it." But Lorraine's smile seemed a little tight, a little forced. She leaned forward and said, "Before we get to that, I just have to ask you something. You know, a lot of people have been talking about your comedy lately. Some people say it's offensive. Some people say you go too far. What do you say to those critics?" The audience went quiet. This was not the light, fun question anyone expected. Ricky shifted in his seat, still trying to keep things friendly. He said, "Well, comedy is supposed to push boundaries. It's supposed to make you think. I've always believed that nothing should be off limits in comedy as long as the joke is actually funny and has a point." Lorraine shook her head, and her expression changed. The friendly host was gone. Now she looked annoyed, almost aggressive. She said, "But don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with your platform? You have millions of fans. Don't you think you should be more careful about what you say?" Ricky stayed calm. He said, "I think my responsibility is to be honest and to make people laugh. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm trying to make people think about things in a different way. That's what comedy has always done." Suzanne Reed, the fashion expert, jumped in. She looked uncomfortable, but tried to smooth things over. She said, "I think what Lorraine is trying to say is that maybe there's a difference between pushing boundaries and just being mean. Some of your jokes can feel a bit cruel, don't you think?" Ricky turned to her and said, "I don't think I'm being mean. I'm making jokes about ideas, about society, about things that I think are silly or hypocritical. I'm not targeting individuals to hurt them. There's a big difference." But Lorraine was not backing down. She cut him off and said, "Well, I disagree. I think you hide behind this idea of comedy to say whatever you want without any consequences. You make fun of people, you make fun of serious issues, and then you just say it's all a joke when people get upset." The audience was silent now. You could feel the tension in the room. Ricky looked at Lorraine and said, "That's not fair. I don't hide behind anything. I stand by everything I say. And if people are upset, they're free to not watch. But I'm not going to change what I do just because some people don't like it." Mark Henderson, the celebrity columnist, decided to join in. He looked directly at Ricky and said, "But isn't that a bit arrogant? To think that you're above criticism? To think that you don't need to listen to anyone who disagrees with you?" Ricky looked surprised by the attack, but stayed composed. He said, "I'm not above criticism at all. People can criticize me all they want. But there's a difference between criticism and trying to silence someone because you don't like what they have to say. I listen to people, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with them or change my work to please them." Lorraine let out a little laugh, but it was not a friendly laugh. It was mocking. She said, "Oh, here we go. The free speech defense. How predictable. You know what, Ricky? Free speech doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want without people calling you out on it." Ricky nodded and said, "You're absolutely right. It doesn't. and people are free to call me out. But you invited me here to talk about my work, and now you're just attacking me. This isn't a conversation. This is an ambush." The word ambush hung in the air. Natalie Stevens, the entertainment reporter, looked nervous. She tried to redirect the conversation. She said, "Maybe we should just talk about the new special." Ricky, "Y'all, what can fans expect from it?" But Lorraine was not interested in moving on. She talked over Natalie and said, "No, I think this is important. I think we need to talk about this. Ricky, you make millions of pounds from your comedy. You have a huge platform, and you use that platform to punch down at people who can't defend themselves. Don't you think that's wrong?" Ricky looked directly at Lorraine. His voice was still calm, but you could hear the frustration building. He said, "I don't punch down. I punch up at the powerful, at the hypocrites, at the people who deserve to be made fun of. And I make fun of myself too. That's what satire is. That's what comedy is supposed to do." Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. She said, "That's what you tell yourself, maybe. But the truth is, you're just a bully with a microphone. And people are tired of it. They're tired of comedians like you, thinking you can say anything and hide behind the word comedy." That was it. That was the moment. You could see Ricky's face change. He was not angry, but he was done. He said quietly, "You just called me a bully on your own show after inviting me here. I came here in good faith to talk about my work, and you've spent the entire time attacking me personally. This is not okay." Suzanne Reed looked at Lorraine with wide eyes. Even she seemed shocked by how far this had gone. She said, "Lorraine, maybe that was a bit harsh." But Lorraine ignored her. She stared at Ricky and said, "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're not funny anymore. You're just mean. And people are starting to see it." The audience gasped. You could hear people whispering. This was beyond uncomfortable now. This was hostile. Ricky stood up from his chair. He looked at Lorraine and said, "You know what? I don't need to sit here and be insulted. I thought this was going to be a professional interview. But clearly, you just wanted to use me to make yourself look good by tearing me down. I'm not going to be part of that." Lorraine's face went red. She stood up too and said, "Oh, so now you're going to storm off? How very mature of you. Can't handle a little criticism, can you?" Ricky shook his head. He said, "This isn't criticism. This is a personal attack. There's a difference. You didn't ask me one question about my work. You just wanted to call me names and act superior. I've been on hundreds of talk shows, and I've never been treated this disrespectfully." Mark Henderson jumped back in, trying to defend Lorraine. He said, "Come on, Ricky. She's just asking tough questions. Isn't that what journalists are supposed to do?" Ricky turned to him and said, "Tough questions are fine. Calling someone a bully on live television is not a tough question. It's an insult, and I don't have to sit here and take it." Lorraine crossed her arms. She said, "Fine. If you can't handle it, then leave. We don't need you here anyway. There are plenty of other comedians who are actually funny and not offensive." The audience was shocked. Some people were shaking their heads. Others looked angry. Natalie Stevens looked like she wanted to disappear. She said softly, "Lorraine, maybe we should just take a breath here." But Lorraine was on a roll now. She pointed at Ricky and said, "You walk around acting like you're this genius comedian, but really, you're just a man who makes a living being cruel. And the fact that you can't even take a little bit of pushback without running away just proves my point." Ricky stood there for a moment, just looking at her. Then he said, "I'm not running away. I'm choosing not to engage with someone who clearly has no interest in having an honest conversation. You set this up to make me look bad, and I'm not going to play along. Goodbye, Lorraine." He started to walk off the set, but Lorraine was not done. She called after him, "That's right. Run away, just like you always do when someone challenges you." Ricky stopped. He turned around and said, "You want to talk about running away? You invited me here under false pretenses. You told me this was going to be a friendly interview about my work. Instead, you ambushed me with personal attacks. That's not challenging someone. That's being dishonest, and it's beneath you. Suzanne Reed finally spoke up more forcefully. She looked at Lorraine and said, "He has a point, Lorraine. This has gone too far. We're supposed to be having a conversation, not a fight." Lorraine spun around to face Suzanne. Her voice was sharp. She said, "Don't you dare take his side. He's the one who came on this show acting like he's better than everyone else." Ricky shook his head in disbelief. He said, "I never said I was better than anyone. I just came here to talk about my comedy special. You're the one who made this personal. You're the one who started attacking me the second I sat down." Lorraine stepped closer to Ricky. Her face was tight with anger. She said, "You know what your problem is? You can dish it out, but you can't take it. You spend your whole career making fun of people, but the second someone criticizes you, you fall apart." Ricky laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. He said, "I'm not falling apart. I'm standing here calmly while you're losing your mind on live television. And for the record, I can take criticism just fine. What I can't take is being lied to and then insulted. There's a difference." The audience was completely silent now. Everyone was watching this unfold, unable to look away. Mark Henderson tried again to defend Lorraine. He said, "Ricky, I think you're overreacting. Lorraine is just doing her job." Ricky turned to him and said, "Her job is to interview guests, not to attack them. If she wanted to have a debate about comedy, she could have been honest about that from the start. But she didn't. She brought me on under false pretenses and then tried to humiliate me. That's not doing her job. That's being unprofessional." Lorraine let out a loud sigh. She said, "Oh, please. You're not being humiliated. You're just upset that someone finally had the courage to call you out on your nonsense. You've been getting away with this for years, and I'm done pretending like it's okay." Ricky stared at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "You know what? I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because this isn't about me at all. This is about you trying to prove something. Maybe you're trying to prove you're a serious journalist. Maybe you're trying to prove you're not just a morning show host. I don't know. But using me as your punching bag to make yourself feel important is sad." Lorraine's face went even redder. She said loudly, "How dare you? How dare you come on my show and talk to me like that? You think you can just say whatever you want to me?" Ricky stayed calm. He said, "You've been saying whatever you want to me for the last 10 minutes. I'm just responding, but I'm done now. This whole thing is ridiculous, and I'm not going to be part of it anymore." He turned to leave again. This time, Lorraine shouted after him, "Don't you walk away from me. I'm not done talking to you." Ricky stopped and looked back at her. He said, "Well, I'm done talking to you. You can keep yelling if you want, but I'm leaving. This is not how professionals behave, and I won't be treated this way." Natalie Stevens stood up and tried to intervene. She said, "Okay, everyone, let's just calm down. This has gotten way out of hand. Maybe we should just take a break." But Lorraine ignored her completely. She pointed at Ricky and said, "You are the most arrogant, self-absorbed person I have ever met. You think you're so clever, so funny, but you're just a bully who hides behind jokes." Ricky shook his head slowly. He said, "You keep using that word, bully. But look at what's happening right now. I'm trying to leave, and you're screaming at me. I tried to have a civil conversation, and you attacked me. Who's the bully here, Lorraine?" The audience started to murmur. Some people were nodding. They could see what was happening. Lorraine was losing control, and Ricky was staying calm. Suzanne Reed stood up and said firmly, "Lorraine, stop. This needs to stop right now." Lorraine spun around to face Suzanne. She said, "Don't you tell me to stop. This is my show. I'll run it however I want." Suzanne looked shocked. She said, "I know it's your show, but this is not right. You're being cruel to a guest who came here in good faith." Lorraine's voice got even louder. She said, "I'm being cruel? He's the one who makes a career out of being cruel. I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine." Ricky spoke up again. His voice was tired now. He said, "This isn't about my comedy. This is about you. You have some kind of personal issue with me, and you used your show as a platform to take it out on me. That's not professional. That's not journalism. That's just petty." Lorraine took a step toward him. She said, "Petty? You want to talk about petty? You make fun of people for a living. You mock people's beliefs, their values, their lives. And you call me petty?" Ricky said, "I make jokes about ideas. About hypocrisy. About things I think are worth questioning. I don't invite people onto a show and then ambush them with personal attacks. That's what you did. That's what makes this petty." Mark Henderson stood up now too. He said, "Ricky, I think you need to understand that Lorraine has a right to ask you difficult questions. You're a public figure. You should be able to handle it." Ricky looked at him and said, "For the last time, I can handle difficult questions. What I can't handle is being lied to. I was told this was going to be a conversation about my work. Instead, it was an ambush. And now you're all ganging up on me like I'm the problem here. It's unbelievable." Lorraine walked right up to Ricky until she was standing very close to him. She said, "You are the problem. You and comedians like you who think you can say anything without consequences. Well, guess what? There are consequences. And one of them is getting called out on national television." Ricky did not back away. He stood his ground and said, "I accept consequences for what I say. I always have. But this isn't about consequences. This is about you trying to use me to boost your own ego. And I'm not going to be part of it." The tension in the studio was almost unbearable. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was watching in stunned silence. Natalie Stevens looked like she was about to cry. She said, "Please, can we just end this? This is getting out of control." But Lorraine was not listening. She was staring at Ricky with pure anger in her eyes. She said, "You know what? I want you off my show. Right now. Get out." Ricky raised his eyebrows. He said, "I've been trying to leave for the last 5 minutes. You're the one who kept screaming at me." Lorraine shouted, "I said get out. Now. You're not welcome here." Ricky looked around at the panel, at the audience, at the cameras. He said calmly, "Okay, I'm leaving. But I want everyone watching to know that I came here in good faith. I was respectful. I tried to have a conversation. And I was treated horribly. This is not how guests should be treated. This is not how television should work." He started walking toward the exit. Lorraine called after him one more time. She said, "Good riddance. We don't need people like you on this show." Ricky stopped at the edge of the set. He turned back and said, "People like me? You mean people who expect to be treated with basic respect? Yeah. I guess you don't need people like that. Good luck with your show, Lorraine." And with that, he walked off. The cameras followed him as he left the studio. Behind him, Lorraine stood there, her face still red with anger. Suzanne Reed had her head in her hands. Mark Henderson looked uncomfortable. Natalie Stevens was staring at the floor. The audience did not know what to do. Some people started clapping for Ricky as he left. Others just sat there in shock. Lorraine turned to the camera. She tried to compose herself. She said, "Well, that was certainly something. I think we all saw the real Ricky Gervais just then. Someone who can't handle being challenged. Someone who runs away when things get tough." But Suzanne Reed shook her head. She said quietly, but loud enough for the microphone to pick up, "That's not what happened. Ah, and you know it." Lorraine shot her a look, but Suzanne did not back down. The show cut to a commercial break. The audience was buzzing. People were talking to each other, pointing at the stage. Some people were angry at Lorraine. Others were defending her. But everyone agreed on one thing. They had just witnessed one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history. What started as a simple morning show interview had turned into a full-blown confrontation. Ricky Gervais had come to talk about his comedy special. He had expected a friendly conversation. Instead, he had walked into a trap. Lorraine Kelly had attacked him from the moment he sat down. She had called him a bully. She had accused him of being cruel. She had dismissed his work and his talent. And when he tried to defend himself, she had gotten even more aggressive. The panel members had mostly taken Lorraine's side, except for Suzanne Reed, who had tried to calm things down and had eventually spoken up for Ricky. Mark Henderson had defended Lorraine at every turn, even when it was clear she had gone too far. Natalie Stevens had tried to stay neutral, but her discomfort was obvious. She knew this was not right, and through it all, Ricky had stayed calm. He had tried to reason with Lorraine. He had tried to explain his position. He had tried to redirect the conversation, but nothing worked. Lorraine was determined to make him look bad. She was determined to use him as an example. And when he finally decided to leave, she had acted like he was the one being unreasonable. The truth was clear to anyone watching. This was not a fair interview. This was not an honest conversation. This was an ambush. While Lorraine had invited Ricky onto her show with one purpose, to tear him down, to make herself look tough and fearless by attacking a famous comedian. And when he refused to play along, when he refused to just sit there and take it, she had kicked him off the show. But who really looked bad in all of this? Ricky had been polite. He had been reasonable. He had tried to have a civil discussion. He had only gotten upset when Lorraine started personally attacking him. He had only decided to leave when it became clear that Lorraine had no interest in treating him with respect. He had defended himself without losing his temper. He had stood his ground without being cruel. Lorraine, on the other hand, had been aggressive from the start. She had set up the interview under false pretenses. She had attacked Ricky personally. She had called him names. And she had dismissed his work. She had refused to listen to his responses. She had talked over him. She had screamed at him. And when her own panel member had tried to calm her down, she had turned on her too. The contrast could not have been clearer. Ricky was the guest who had been mistreated. Lorraine was the host who had abused her power. And everyone watching knew it. The audience knew it. Suzanne Reed knew it. Even Mark Henderson and Natalie Stevens probably knew it, even if they did not want to admit it on camera. This moment would be remembered. Not because Ricky Gervais lost his temper or said something outrageous, but because he had been the bigger person. He had walked into a hostile situation and had handled it with grace. He had been attacked and had defended himself without attacking back. When he had been lied to and had called it out calmly, and when he realized there was no point in continuing, he had simply left. Lorraine had wanted to make him look bad. She had wanted to prove that he could not handle criticism. She had wanted to show that he was arrogant and difficult, but she had achieved the opposite. She had shown everyone watching that she was the one who could not handle a simple interview. She was the one who was arrogant. She was the one who was difficult. The 47 seconds it took for everything to fall apart had felt like an eternity. From the moment Lorraine asked her first aggressive question to the moment she told Ricky to get out, the tension had been building. Every comment had made it worse. Every insult had pushed things further, and by the end, there was no going back. This was supposed to be a morning show. Light entertainment, fun conversations, celebrity gossip. But it had turned into something else entirely. It had become a spectacle, a disaster, a moment that people would talk about for years, and not in a good way. For Ricky, this was just another example of what he had been talking about for years. He had always said that some people did not understand comedy, that some people were too sensitive, that some people wanted to control what others could say. And here was Lorraine, proving his point. She did not like his comedy, so she decided to attack him personally. She did not agree with his views, so she tried to silence him. She had a platform, and she used it to bully someone she disagreed with. The irony was not lost on anyone. Lorraine had spent the entire interview calling Ricky a bully, but her behavior had been the definition of bullying. She had used her power as the host to attack a guest. She had ganged up on him with her panel. She had refused to let him speak. She had shouted at him. She had tried to humiliate him on live television. If that was not bullying, then what was? Ricky had tried to point this out. He had asked her directly, "Who's the bully here?" And she had not had an answer. Because the answer was obvious. She was. She had been the bully all along. And now everyone could see it. As the commercial break continued, the producers were probably panicking. How were they going to come back from this? How were they going to explain what had just happened? How were they going to salvage the rest of the show? These were questions that had no good answers, because what had just happened was inexcusable. A host had attacked a guest. A professional had behaved unprofessionally, and it had all been captured on live television. In those final moments before Ricky left the studio, you could see the realization on Lorraine's face. She knew she had gone too far. She knew she had made a mistake, but she was too proud to admit it, too stubborn to apologize, too committed to her attack to back down. So she had doubled down instead. She had told him to get out. She had acted like he was the problem. And in doing so, she had only made herself look worse. This was a lesson in how not to conduct an interview, in how not to treat a guest, in how not to use your platform. Lorraine Kelly had all the power in that situation. She was the host. It was her show. She controlled the conversation, and she had used that power badly. She had used it to attack someone who could not fight back on equal terms, someone who was there at her invitation, someone who had trusted her to be professional. And Ricky? He had handled it perfectly. He had not lost his cool. He had not insulted her back. He had not made a scene. He had simply stated his case, defended himself, and left when it became clear that there was no point in staying. That took strength. That took character. That took class. And everyone watching had seen it. The audience had seen a comedian walk into an ambush and refuse to be humiliated. They had seen a guest stand up for himself against a hostile host. They had seen someone maintain their dignity in the face of unprovoked attacks. And they had seen a host lose control and reveal her true colors. It was not the outcome Lorraine had wanted, but it was the outcome she had created. This clash would be talked about for a long time. People would analyze every word, every gesture, every facial expression. They would debate who was right and who was wrong. But for most people, the answer would be clear. Ricky Gervais had been the victim of an unprofessional, hostile interview. And Lorraine Kelly had been the aggressor who had let her personal feelings get in the way of doing her job properly. In 47 seconds, everything had changed. A routine celebrity interview had become a television disaster. A friendly morning show had become a battlefield. And a respected host had shown a side of herself that shocked everyone watching. It was a moment that nobody would forget. A moment that proved that live television can go wrong in the most spectacular ways. And a moment that showed what happens when someone with power decides to abuse it. Ricky Gervais walked out of that studio with his head held high. He had been kicked off the Lorraine Kelly show, but he had won. Not because he wanted to win, but because he had been honest, respectful, and dignified. And sometimes that is all you need to do to come out on top. Even when everything seems to be going wrong. Even when you are being attacked. Even when the person with all the power is trying to make you look bad. Sometimes, just being yourself is enough. And that is exactly what Ricky Gervais did on that unforgettable day.